Hey, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday. It is June. And we want to thank first and foremost our sponsors, CKC, Good Food Catering, and Lightcom LLC. Thank you for sponsoring RQX. How are you?
Good. It's been a fantastic day.
You've had a couple trips, and I get to ask how you've been and what you've been up to.
Oh, well, today I went bead shopping.
You did?
Yeah. So for those of you in Tulsa, there's this amazing bead store called the Bead Merchant. It's amazing. This is where this came from. Look how beautiful it is.
Wow.
I know. So we can't even start the show without explaining where this came from.
It's mesmerizing what you're doing. Keep doing that.
Isn't it? She was amazing. The owner was so amazing. We spent, 2 hours in there. I was bead shopping for a mala.
Ooh, what is that?
So it's like a ceremonial necklace.
Okay. And why would you be getting one? What would you be doing with it?
To take it to ceremony.
Oh.
So Sunday, I leave for Columbia for a plant medicine retreat.
And what would this, what's the significance of having this?
So for me, I picked crystal beads that's basically symbolize protection against negative energy, evil spirits, things like that.
When you go, when you do something like this plant medicine retreat, what exactly can you expect? Like ethereally, where does your brain go?
Oh God. Well, so that's different for each person. I think it's so individualized and unique, each person's experience and journey on the medicine. And so really what it does is in my experience, I went to Ecuador in 2023. And so this isn't my first retreat, but in my experience, personally, the medicine is like a divine something that just swims through your cellular network and pulls out stuck trauma.
Oh,
we store trauma, negative emotions, negative energy. We store this stuff in our cells. Yeah. And so when you do this, not only does I feel like it activates your pineal gland.
Okay.
But also there's a purging factor. And so every time you purge, you're purging negative energy stuck in your cells. So it immediately, not only does the medicine raise your frequency, but the purge does too. God, that sounds awful, doesn't it? The purge.
Yeah, we're not thinking of the movies, everyone.
The purge. It cleanses it cleanses all that negativity. Not all of it, but it's incredibly healing. And then you leave with this just amazing grasp on the nature of the human condition. You have so much acceptance and love and compassion for humanity in general.
Can I ask you, backing up, because the it's more about that protection you're looking for and what you're purging. It's not just you that are doing this. So is it more about you also protecting yourself from other?
Absolutely.
So what does that look like? Because you got what does the room look like? You got
so ceremonies in a maloka typically, and so you've got shamans that come in and they do blessings over the ceremony, and it's a process. This is an ancient ceremony. These indigenous tribes have been doing this for thousands of years.
Okay.
It's alternative medicine is what it is.
So when you're doing it though, everyone's purging, or potentially purging. So all that's in the air. All that energy is in the air.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. You walk in and there are just buckets beside all of the.
Okay. There's a physical purge, but there's this.
Purge.
What I'm trying to get to is maybe so esoterically though, there's this energy in the air that could be either negative or sad or bad, or even some of it could be happy and thrilling. But the thing is, you need to protect yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that, so the goal for my mala was just that.
Okay.
To not just protect myself from like whatever. And I'm not saying that when you're on plant medicine, evil things get in, but, I know that people have experienced, a lot of shamans report seeing, evil entities.
Okay.
And so that's one of the reasons why the Maloka is so protected. And in ceremony, they do all the blessings and, they cleanse the space before it starts for that reason. But yeah, I think that protecting yourself, protecting your energy, going in with intention but then also being flexible with the experience and, not disappointed in what you see or what you don't.
It's pretty intense. Because I have two parts to the question. I was hoping maybe you could explain how intense, but also then I wanted you to relate that to the purge of it. Like how intense could, how intense could that purge look like?
That's also different. Mine, it's not this. So everybody purges differently in this experience. Some people vomit. Some people
do things.
Things. Some people cry, shake. I mean, some people sweat. There's different types of purge, but most people purge physically, like one end or the other. I don't know how to say that.
But esoterically, see, this is important because a lot of people don't acknowledge the point of feeling better is there's also this energetic change.
Yes, absolutely.
So having those crystals, having that protection is necessary on a level you're not normally walking around day to day with. It's not you're being very aware. You're walking into this very prepared. Do you think some people won't go into it?
Yes. Well, because some people it'll be their first time. And when I had I ended up meeting my soul sister at the last retreat. Okay. And she brought she made a mala before she came, and I really struggled in ceremony. It was the first experience was really difficult. Yeah, and so she let me borrow her mala. Actually, she ended up just giving it to me. It's in my closet. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's very sweet.
Yeah.
Did it change her experience at all, not having it on, or did she just give it to you after?
She had multiples.
Oh.
So it was an extra.
Like extra layers?
It was extra. Yeah. She brought extra layers.
Do you think it's important then for people who are going to go experience some sort of a plant medicine retreat to walk into it with exactly this kind of knowledge?
Yeah, I think the more research you can do on it spiritually, the better. I think that there's just a lot of energy flowing in spaces like this, positive and negative. So you have to really protect yourself, but ultimately you're in your own space, you're in your own bubble. You just, and it's really dark. Most of these ceremonies are at night. So it's dark. There may or may not be a fire in some places. What I feel like most jungle retreats they're outdoor and they have, fire pits in the middle of the Maloka, but then there's some spaces that they don't do fire. They just it's completely dark. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating to me in that the purge. When I know I asked you the question, we got off it for a minute, but physically it gets intense. There are things that are happening for that purge, but cellularly on that esoteric and on that processing, when you're doing something like this, there's no wiggle room for you to avoid the experience, right?
Oh, no. Once you drink the medicine and the medicine is in you, you're along for the ride for lots of hours.
Like what's the range of hours?
I think that the average would probably be, and I could be completely wrong here, but in my experience and knowing, having friends and other people that have experienced it, usually like 6 to 12 hours.
That's all. So some people get on, I'm trying to get, to give people an idea. If you're like go down a roller coaster, you feel a quick, like super intense feeling, right? If you have a super quick, or somebody scares you around the corner, like kind of a TikTok thing, right?
Yeah. Like just imagine that feeling for 12 hours.
Straight.
Yeah.
That level of intensity.
It's very intense.
Either high or low or both. It's nonstop
It's nonstop. And the first time I drank it, I wanted out immediately. It was so intense.
So what is your expectation going to it? I do want to jump to this just to follow that train of thought.
Sure.
What's your feeling about the first time this time?
Ooh, I feel a little bit more prepared this time and in the experience and what to expect. I'm going in with more awareness around the medicine. So the active ingredient in this is DMT, and this is a chemical that we secrete when we're born and when we die. And, but it's something that, so a normal experience on that is, like 5 to 10 minutes, but on this type of plant medicine, it's a very intense, long experience.
What does it flush out? What does it do to you? Like what was your feelings the first time?
Terrified. know it's going to die.
Well, how did it go? Like then, like where did it take you?
Oh, so typically the medicine, what I'm expecting coming up, there will be 4 ceremonies.
Okay.
So it'll be three nights in a row, and then skip a day, and then a daytime ceremony, I think, or maybe it's 2 days. Yeah, it's 3 nights, and then you do a daytime, I think, on the day before you leave.
Okay.
And so going in, I think that maybe the first 2 ceremonies are probably going to be spent purging quite a bit. I think that I don't think that my first trip was as successful as I wanted it to be as far as the purge goes. And so I think that even since then, there's more of an acknowledgement about the stuck stuff in my cells.
Okay.
And so what I'm hoping is the first couple of ceremonies, I'm able to purge enough that I can reach a place of, because I think that's what happens. I think you get in there, you purge, your vibration raises a little bit.
Okay.
Then the next ceremony you get in there and you purge, and then you get a little bit higher, right? So I think that once you purge enough, that you've got enough of that stuck stuff out of you, that the medicine can kind of swim through, and then you you have a lighter experience, or a more divine experience. Some people might drink it and then immediately get there. I don't know. It just wasn't the case for me.
I gotta ask you then, some people, I think, a lot of people think of an experience, like, for instance, like whether we're going on an expedition or going on a trip, and they get an idea in their head, up, down, uptime, downtime, they're going to be guided into something. Just so that I want to dig in on, this isn't something where it's like you're just, when we say a high or low, I said roller coaster. When you're in the middle of this isn't an experience where you're waiting for anyone to tell you anything.
No, this is completely unique to each individual, and you go into your own space. Okay. So, there's plants are intelligent. There's intelligence in plants, and they hold a lot of information. And this, I feel like, is divine. And this specific type of plant just kind of swims through your veins. I heard Aubrey Marcus describe it once. I think it was him. Like, there's little light workers swimming around in your veins, and that's exactly what it feels like. Within minutes, when the medicine hits your veins, it's like you can feel little sparks swimming through you, and it's just, it feels light, right? But then where it takes you, it depends on what needs to be worked on in yourself. So my first experience brought up some things that I needed to heal from, childhood. Okay. And a lot of it, and that's what it does, is it just holds a mirror in front of your face, and it shows you yourself. It's deep. And that's where the shadow work is, right? Like the things in us that sometimes we're not even conscious of. Okay. She just kind of brings it to the surface and then makes you look at it. And then you don't have a choice. You can't, it's just there in you. And then you have this awareness around why and what, and because of the rise in your vibration, I think that you're able to comprehend and see clearer than before. So you realize when you leave that you're not really angry anymore about whatever. You don't have to hold on to anything from the past, or whether it's childhood trauma or addiction, or whatever life experiences that you have that you're not fond of. You realize that you don't have to hold on to that stuff anymore, and you don't have to. There's nobody to blame, and I think that that's a big piece of it, is because I feel like we walk through life and things happen to us, and we're always blaming people for why we are the way we are, or why we make the mistakes we make. And the reality of it is, we're all do the best we can on the planet, right? And and sometimes we don't have enough awareness around things like parenting. I made a lot of mistakes. I was asleep most of the time. My kids are teenagers now, but when they were little, I was asleep. I made a lot of mistakes, but I was unaware. And so it's not until I feel like, when I went to the first retreat, there was, things that I needed to work through and figure out for myself. But one of the things that I found was, you find a lot of grace and compassion and forgiveness for yourself, as well as everybody else, because you also see why they are the way they are, and so it's, once you see the depth of that, then it's really hard to hold on to any sort of like hate or resentment or anger towards someone else when you see that we're all just broken, hurting, and unhealed people walking around on the planet, just unconsciously harming ourselves and each other in big or small ways. But that's where the healing comes in. When you heal, then you're aware of it, and you're cognizant of you're not walking around the planet just haphazardly harming people.
Well, so one of my follow-up questions for people who might want to research something like this themselves. So 12 hours or 6 hours or the period of time that you're going through this internalized personal experience, what do you do when you're not specific? This is what I meant about a tour group, is like people expect to be led or something like that. They're going to go somewhere, but because someone else is leading them to someplace they've never been. But this is internalized. So they have shamans, they have people guiding, but now they're in a space that only they can know. So, and whether it's 6 hours or 12 hours or however long it takes, at the end of it though, what's it like then to process through? What do you do to prep yourself between ceremonies? What do you do to either recover or be introspective, or what do you do?
Yeah.
What's it like?
Sometimes you talk to other people, you learn a lot about other people's experiences. Everybody's there basically for the same reason, for healing. This is the first retreat. There were tons of doctors. We had actually the soul sister I met, she's a psychologist. There were psychologists, tons of therapists. There was a what's the foot doctor, podiatrist.
Okay.
I think that's what he was. So anyways, there's several different types of doctors there. Vets, a lot of vets go, people with PTSD, people that, anxiety, depression, things like that. They don't recommend it for people with diagnosed mental disorders or, personality disorder, psychosis, anything like that. That might not be good for those specific cases. But, for vets, and then there's so much research behind, the healing properties in this plant and the results of the experience, Yeah,
I just want for people who are interested, they can look into it, but it is like one of those things where I don't think a lot of people get information about, like, hey, there's this period of time that it's super intense, but then there's this other time and it's meditative.
And you journal. But you do add, I forgot your question, honestly. So you journal, you do a lot of journaling, meditating, and they offer that stuff there: meditation, yoga, breath work, all that stuff. In fact, after the last retreat in 2023 that I went to, a month later, I ended up in Peru, because at the 2023 retreat that May, I went into a breathwork session with this wonderful, beautiful German man named Peter. And he led the very first breathwork session, and it was so intense, almost intense, and as intense and profound as the medicine itself. Wow. So much so that I ended up in Peru a month later, so I could learn how to facilitate breathwork myself. Cool. So lots of breathwork, lots of meditation, yoga, journaling, and then some people, like, I spent a lot of time just laying out in the grass, contemplating my existence.
Was it different though than it's ever been in your life?
The experience?
No, laying there and contemplating as you leveled or changed as you went through these ceremonies. Did everything, your perspective on everything, was it different?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Yeah, because you start, not only do you see these things, but there's almost like a forced healing that happens. Like once your vibration, once that frequency levels up a little bit, and you feel your heart opens up a little bit more, you feel a little bit more love for humanity. It's easier to forgive, forget, and let go, and not really forget, but forgive and let go.
Okay.
But yeah. So, and I'm sorry, I forgot the question again.
Well, there's this experience of doing breath work, and then there's a feeling of, eating better, doing more exercise, meditation, and all that. I was wondering if that, as you do ceremonies and as you have this experience, how intense does it change your introspection and your meditative time when you're not doing ceremony? Like, what's it like in those periods where you're contemplating what happened the night before, the day before? And
well, that depends on what you see, honestly. A lot of people, the first ceremony I had was really, really rough, and so I spent a lot of time by myself in my room the next day, sort of continuing the purge through tears and journaling, and but then you get up the next day and it's like, okay, well, that part's done, let's move on and find the next thing.
All right, so now I got to back up and go on an esoteric question, which is, you said she. What she are you referring to? She shows you.
So
why is she? And what is a she?
Okay, so I'm not really. I don't know how they determined what if a plant is feminine or masculine, but I guess it's been determined that this specific plant is feminine, and so it's just known that she's a she.
Oh, okay. But what was your feeling about it?
If she feels like a she, I don't know.
Okay. Well, I don't know.
She feels like an ancestral grandmother, just
okay.
And you can ask her too when she's in there doing her work to be gentle.
And things seem to change
sometimes, yeah.
Okay. And sometimes you're forced to look at stuff that
she just knows what's best. She knows what's in there. That's what I'm saying, that the intelligence is unlike anything you've ever experienced inside your body.
All right. So what was it like? I don't know if it's worth saying, or if I should say day 1, 2, 3, or week 1, 2, 3, or month 1, 2, 3. But what was it like after you came back? Like immediately?
Wow, euphoric. It was euphoric. I came back I felt like some sort of an ascended master, but not really. You know what I mean? I'm not comparing myself to any of them. I've got a long ways to go if I ever achieve it in this lifetime. But you walk away just feeling just calm, calm and peace. And it takes so much to get you, to a place of like anger or low vibration, just because you're vibrating so high that you're just unbothered. Everything just kind of rolls off your back. Yeah.
All right. So it's not, there's a specific thing. Was there anything that specifically stood out when you came back that was like, I would have never looked at it like this?
Really, it's just the compassion and forgiveness that you feel for anybody and everybody that's ever caused you harm. It's
personal.
It's very personal. The entire experience is very, very personal. Yes.
Cool. That's just kind of my thought, as far as those are my official questions, I think.
Can we turn the spotlight on you for a second?
Sure.
Okay. I have a question for you.
Okay.
So we were just talking recently about, actually, I got to tag along on a doctor's appointment once when we were in Minneapolis.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So as the doctor is discussing certain things, he says something about, he asked you if you were still taking your diabetic medicine. And do you remember? I just looked at you and I was like, "You're diabetic?"
No, I'm not, which is what I said then.
I know.
The metformin, yes.
Yeah. So what is that? What is that for? What does it do?
So,
well, let's first, so this type of medicine is like a twofold type thing, right? Mm-hmm. And so what they have found is that it not only helps with diabetes, but it also is a longevity medicine.
Right. And so what happened is that whether I was pre-diabetic, they looked at my A1C, which is a test that shows over 3 months, no matter what you've done with your sugar, or it gives you an average and says, this is what your pancreas is doing with sugar. And they're just like, listen, your sugar was high, which may have contributed to why you had a widowmaker, because if you were, if it didn't, for some reason, if it didn't process the sugar right, it may have contributed to it. There's still a lot of mystery around plaque. And, and I was under a tremendous amount of, I guess, stress, which I didn't realize. I'm not really good at processing, or actually I'm really great at processing stress. If you want to count being under the most stress anyone could be under and just ignoring it and continuing to function highly functionally, I can do that without having any whining feelings about it. It's great.
Is it though? Did it almost kill you?
It did kill me 7 times.
Okay, yeah.
So right. I did actually.
But it didn't take you out completely.
No, it almost killed me completely, but it only killed me a bunch.
Oh, I'm going to make a note of something. Do we have a pen in here somewhere?
No, we don't.
I'm going to go grab one. Keep talking.
Okay.
I just need to make a note. Keep going. Keep talking.
All right. So while we're doing this, metformin is a drug specifically they had tested my A1C, which said, hey, you've had high sugar, you're maybe diabetic, pre-diabetic. There was some argument there because, I've been paleo over the years. I've done a lot of things, but the year leading up to my demise, for those just not, tuning in, not knowing, I died. I had a widowmaker. Most people, 91% die and they don't come back. 9% live. 80% of those are cognitively and physically completely disability. They're disabled either temporarily or semi-permanently throughout their life after a widowmaker, if they survive. I walked out of ICU in 17 days. No one does that, but I do practice breath work. I am baseline underneath the stress and the way I was eating over the last year. And I think there's a lot of reasons why I probably made it. But the metformin specifically is because my A1C was at a number where they're like, well, we have to put you on this.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the enticing factors, one of the doctors was like, hey, and this is like almost 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this is about, whatever, almost 2 years ago, that the doctor that I met with, and this is one of the cardiologists that saved me, and we're following up, and they're like, hey, metformin is also the studies. This is now, the conversation with me is coming after data that's already now 3 years old. And now there's new news articles about it. And that's coming out that metformin is showing to be a longevity med.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Johnson, his blueprint formula, the longevity now expert is, and I'm doing the protocols right now too, but the idea is that it seems to show a lengthening of life. And specifically, there's been articles saying the lengthening of life of females. So, of course, in the world,
so if you're a lady diabetic and you're on this drug,
there's an added benefit. Yeah. Well, here's the thing: the longevity world and the longevity community and the idea in biohacking.
Maybe here's an idea, ladies. If you're on them, I'm sorry, we'll come right back to it. But hey, if you're on this medicine, maybe you should do some before and afters.
Yeah. So the idea then is that cognitively, it's not giving an explanation that cognitively you're lasting longer or anything, but so I think all the details of how it's contributing cellularly to you being regenerative or living longer, there has to be actual health benefits at the cellular level. So in the world of longevity, irrelevant to the diabetic part, completely separately, for some reason, metformin seems to have characteristics that are contributing to cellular development that allow you to stay on the planet longer. Specifically, the last article I read yesterday morning was that the study was showing that if women could easily live into their 90s with metformin. We're not sponsored by metformin. It's just the data, and I have to take it. So at first I was like, hey, I don't want to do it. But then we have Brian Johnson with 30 something doctors working with him, and he's taking longevity very seriously. And I'm not religiously is not my concern. My concern is data, just like Brian's.
Sure.
So Brian does the data and just happens to be on a similar, prescription that I'm on. And I'm like, okay, so since I'm biohacking and since I'm doing all these other things, and I'm like, okay, hey, I will stay on metformin just for the longevity side of it. I'm worried about the post data in like 5 years where they're like, oh, you shouldn't take that because it
actually doesn't.
Or it works for longevity, but just not for your spleen.
Right.
Or something, it's like something like my left foot falls off, or like it'll work great, but it kills one kidney. I don't know. That's not true. So right now, all indicators and scientific reports are showing that metformin is definitely a longevity med. It's not just something for diabetes. It's definitely helping with longevity.
But I wonder if they can isolate the component inside the medicine, and if they can isolate the component that contributes to longevity inside the medicine. Is it the overall medicine itself, or is there some sort of component inside the medicine that contributes to longevity that can be isolated, pulled out, and put into something else for people who don't have diabetes?
Yeah, that would be interesting to figure out. And for me, what I'm doing is for everyone listening too. So I started, it wasn't just because I died. I think Brian Johnson's been at this for just over 4 years. And so this is a couple of years ago, and I'd heard about him. I'd heard about this guy doing some extra biohacking. There's people also like Dave Pasco that have been doing it longer. And looking at all the different biohacking, this world of biohacking that's been going on, because we have enough of the mechanics down to really not only increase our length of life, but our quality of life, how youthful we can act and be and even look. And that's superficial, but it's like, yeah, all of it.
But is it though? I mean, when you say how it's not just about looking, I think it's about feeling.
Right.
And
primarily.
Right. And so I think that the cosmetic part of it is just a byproduct of, it's a benefit of it. But ultimately you're looking at the physical benefits of it, the physical longevity, actually being on the planet longer. So I'm wondering, okay, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I think, but you're right. because both play into it. When you look in the mirror
Mm-hmm.
and you're energetically feeling younger, and if you're looking younger,
Mm-hmm.
it's also part of your vitality, I think,
Right.
to just love life.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's superficial to say, oh, it doesn't matter. I do think it does. I think it matters that you work on any cellular methodology that's like the vitality of the longevity of and the endurance, this not just sustainability, but the vitality of your organs and your skin and your health do all give you, I think, an indicator to your overall health that is also mental.
Do you feel like this, so the supplement, let's just call it a supplement. I mean, I know it's a drug, but let's just say if we take supplements like this, if we could isolate whatever it is in there that's creating the longevity factor,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like there is an alternative to this drug, such as lifestyle change?
I think it's all relative. So, and this is like, I recommend everybody go to Brian Johnson's website or Dave Pascoe's or any of the longevity guys, that they list out the most generous part about everybody doing this is that it's all experimental. So everyone's listing out their protocols for free.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of information and everyone should look into it themselves. First thing on everyone's protocol, sleep. Hands down.
That's huge.
Yeah, because the chemistry of all the junky cells and screwed up things in your body, they're getting repaired and they're getting sorted, and it's all happening at night. Mm-hmm. So there's been enough data and medical information that says, look, if you get good sleep, your body goes in all these different modes. And it's not just about your mind resting. It's literally sorting through this gene, or this cell needs to go, this cell needs to go, this cell needs a repair. And when you're in that deep sleep and you get 8 hours, it's doing the most for your body over everything else. And that means mentally too.
So I think that something else to add to that is the breath. The breath does similar things, when we do breath work, when we breathe in clean and we exhale the not, and James Nestor, I was telling you this the other day, James Nestor describes it like a train pulling up to the station, and the good O2 gets on and it goes in, it rides through your bloodstream and it attaches to these, it docks at different cells, right? And then the O2, the clean O2 gets off, and then the CO2 gets on, and then it is expressed, right? The bad from your cells. And so the breath moves stuck energy in your body as well. And I think that when the breath moves stuck energy in your body, it's similar to what you're describing, with sleep, how sleep repairs your cells at night. I think the breath does the same too, when used appropriately with intention.
Stig Severinsen, the site Breathology, which he's also from the same area that Wim Hof is from. Mm-hmm. And he holds all these world records for learning how much breath is important. The studies he's done, and there's been so many biography, history, whatever, there's Discovery. There's a million shows about him as there is about Wim. But one of the things that they studied was lung capacity was directly related to longevity. You're
absolutely, the people with the largest lungs live the longest.
Yeah. Edwin Checkley. So for everyone out there, we'll nerd out just for a second. So
I feel like that's like a given on this show. It's just nerdy.
Tell you what, our show is going to just continue. Hello, Jeff, Long Island, Zach. Sorry, we didn't say anything.
Hey guys.
Earlier. So, Edwin Checkley is originally from Britain, becomes a blacksmith, comes to America from England, and he does these kind of strong arm feats where he would carry 4 men at a time, set them down after 4 men, and set them down. The man, when he died, this is really ironic, he died from a gas leak. Mm-hmm. So this is a period of time where everything was gas lamps. So when he did die, he was in his 70s, and the attending physician said this man cannot be over the age of 40. And he was over in his 70s. And the reason was his lung capacity was incredible. And he practiced breath work before it was really called breath work, right? Mm-hmm. And he said everything is about the lungs. So here he is physically, and also he did not use weights. So he's an early naturalist. Mm-hmm. So Erwin LaCour and the move natural methodologies and everything about movement, which is a thing now beyond, there's fitness and
yoga is just not like what we think it, it's Western yoga is like, let's go to the studio with our water bottles and our yoga mats. And that's not yoga. I mean, it's sort of, but yoga is a spiritual practice, and it is all about specific types of movements in your body.
Yeah. And the reason I bring it up is because his lung capacity was so great that half the reason, and further research showed that doing the actual breath practice, and then Stieg sitting on one breath for 22, fast forward, this is Edwin's doing it way back. And then now we have Stieg doing it for 22 minutes on one breath. The point wasn't just that he oxygenated all of his cellular system so good that he could go for 22 minutes. It's that the complexity, the buildup of the system, if we practice that frequently, I think our cellular repair system, sleeping and awake, and tying into if we could have proper sleep cycles, proper nutrition to feed the repair of that cellular system. If you don't have the building blocks and you're just feeding yourself, but it's not, yes, okay, I'm a big fan of Brian Johnson's now because he's data driven and he's sharing the work, and he's, I think, really being generous with all of it. At the same time, when he says every calorie has to fight for life in me. If I'm going to eat it, it has to do something. And I think Dr. Joe Wallach, the whole idea of our entire mineralized cellular, in order to do repairs, in order to be healthy, we need to eat. Oh, we think we got to eat green things. Well, we have to not just eat green things. We have to eat things that have actual nutritional, foundational building blocks. So if we're eating, although it says organic, if we're not eating nutrient
dense food,
which means, primarily farmers have 16 to 20 nutrients that they have to put in a soil to make any plant grow. But Dr. Joe Wallach's studies and works was all about, hey, look, there's 65 to 90 mineral contents that could be within a soil for a plant to grow. And if you don't have those within the plant, there's this question as to whether or not is your cellular system, with all the breath work and all the meditative work and then all the sleeping and all the exercise, are you getting all the things balanced so that when the cellular system is repairing, or telomeres, are the antennas, what is causing the aging? And if we mix it all together with the breath work and with the physical work and the mental work, and then, I think that with the protocols and supplements, we can have a longer, more engaged life. So the point isn't to be just 90. The point is to be like Edwin Sheckley or Brian Johnson or Dave Pasco or anybody else, where it's like, hey, I'm 60 something or I'm 50 something or I'm 40, and I look, and not just look, but they're testing out.
Right.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Like their blood work and all that stuff. Their lab work is showing.
Yeah, that they are like, their organs are 30 something years old or 20 something years old. They're starting to measure how much you can do to really rejuvenate each of those organs and those things. It's all programming. So if we can keep working on all this.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean it's all programming?
So we have DNA and we have, it never sat right with me when they say, hey, we have a lot of DNA markers. They're junk genes. They're junk genes.
What are junk genes?
I thought Mother Nature was pretty efficient at getting crap it doesn't need, but it's like, these are dormant things, but it has junk genes. And it's like, okay. We didn't even know. First we discovered we have DNA. Then it took them a number of more years to realize that we don't have a double, we have a quad helix. We don't just have a double helix, we have a quad helix. And then it's like, okay, so we keep furthering our understanding of how DNA is actually physically structured, right? But we're still not understanding. It's like, people have downloads and they have these premonitions and they have these connections, and there's this weird thing with twins, and then there's all these things in the ether and quantum science proving collective consciousness. And it's like, okay. So what we're saying then is right now we're biohacking, but on a consciousness side, aren't we just seeing indicators through different modalities and experiences that it seems that maybe at some point in part of our pursuits of discovering our ancient past, maybe we bioengineered some of these junk genes are really part of systems that we can't activate, or we can only activate when you had that breathwork session. What was it like for you?
Oh, it was so intense. The craziest thing was he warned me before it started. He said, you may experience like cramping in your hands or feet. And they did.
Really?
Just like they call them crab claws or whatever. Like, I don't know what happens, but it happened. And my hands just like, and it was hard and intense, and it was just cramping everywhere.
Yeah.
And then he was like, it'll pass, breathe through it. It was super uncomfortable, but I breathed through it. And then by the end, I was sobbing. It was like expressing. Wow. I didn't even understand what had just happened. It was the first breathwork session I'd ever done. And I guess I did it right, because.
How long did your hands, I mean, not that you're keeping track, but how long did your hands cramp up?
It was probably a couple of minutes.
Like, were they at your side, or like, how did they start cramping up?
I mean, everything just kind of drew up, like, and it's really uncomfortable. Like your hands just
like you retracted,
like crap. Yes. Yeah. It was really bizarre, but it's really common, and you just push through it.
What about your feet or anything? Did it,
yeah, everything cramped, but not as intensely as my hands. I don't know. I didn't do any research there. I don't know anything.
Well, yeah, I got asked, so what was it like on the other side of the, what caused it to relax, or what did it feel like after?
I don't know. I just kept breathing. He was just instructing me to breathe through it, and then I did. And it happened a lot when I was in Peru. It was all day breath work, and so it happened a lot in Peru. My hands would cramp, but I'd already known from my first experience that it would pass. But it happened a few times there, and it seems as though that the deeper I would get into the work, the more, like, that's when it would happen. It wouldn't be in the first or two rounds. It'd be in the third or fourth or fifth round of breath work where everything would start to kind of draw up for a second. And then you just have to, you keep breathing, and you just try to relax. And sometimes you might have to take a minute and stop breathing for a second and let your body kind of come back to center. And then you just begin breathing again.
Can you recommend for people, where would you start if you were going to try breathwork for the first time?
So I can confidently recommend, there is a YouTube channel called Breathe with Sandy, and we can link this in the bio. I'll make a note. And he's amazing. And he has tons of videos. My favorite is a 20-minute shamanic breathwork session with drums. And you plug your ears so you can hear, the beat in your ears. It's really intense. The music has a lot to do with it, because when you're focusing on the breath and the sound, it's like meditating. A lot of times I'll sit down to do breath work, and then my brain is just, but the great thing about breath work is it's an active practice. So like when you're sitting down to meditate, I have a hard time with meditation, because my brain never stops. It's just, so it's hard for me to sit down and focus in meditation. But with breath work, it's a little different, because it's an active practice. And so you have a little bit more to focus on. And so when your brain starts to kind of trail off, you can bring yourself back to the breath by focusing on the breath and hearing the sounds around you. Anyhow, I'll share the YouTube video, the channel, in our description. So anybody that wants to kind of dip their toes in it,
that would be a good place to start.
That would be a good place to start. Yeah.
Okay.
It's gentle, and his voice is super soothing, and he walks you through it, and you can hear the breath as you're going, as you're breathing with him. And so it's easy to follow and keep up with. It's like you've got an instructor right there with you, guiding you the whole time.
All right, cool. That I think that these pieces, it's so difficult to combine all the steps.
Yeah.
It's just hard to keep it up every day.
It is.
Even though all we do is breathe every day. The longest I've gone, by the way, I was ramping up my Wim Hof, and one day I just decided I'm going to keep breathing and see how long I can keep the pattern going.
Yeah.
I got it for 5 hours.
What?
I kept it going through conversation. I was able to keep the breath pattern going. Yeah, I was doing my 35, 40 deep breaths.
Super impressive.
And I was able to keep it going. It was very, very.
Was it psychedelic at all?
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that whole geometric patterns and shapes and things. Those intensely came in 2 stages. One was doing the breath work, and then with Wim Hof, you're doing the cold.
Yeah.
That's what activated it somehow.
So you were in an ice bath?
Yeah. So
you were breathing in an ice bath?
Yeah. So you do that.
Jeez Louise.
Well,
it's typically not recommended.
No, what you don't want to do is do it in a pool. That's a bad idea.
That's right. I guess when you're cold, you're awake.
Yeah. So when you're learning how to do this, you definitely want to do it maybe in a shallow and I was doing it in the shower. So it's ice shower.
I just wouldn't recommend beginner, but for anybody beginning in breath work, I just don't do it in water.
Don't do it in water.
It doesn't matter if it's hot or cold.
No
just
driving.
And it doesn't matter if it's this big or not. Just don't do breath work in water if you've never done breath work before.
Well, you should do it. You should do it in water, and you shouldn't do it while you're driving. You should do it sitting or laying down. And well, so in the end, though, what I didn't tell you is that I was doing it. So you do it before you get into the cold, and I would do it in a shower.
Yeah.
And you're getting pretty cold. But I was fortunate enough to be in Minnesota, which means it was easily 20 below zero when I would throw on. And I lived on just for descriptive purposes, I'm on the 4th floor of a near downtown loft, which meant that lots of people would see me if I sat outside. So it's 20 below zero, it's snow. So what I would do is, as I had ramped up the process of Wim Hof, I had made it as far as basically I got to a point where I was doing almost 30, 40 minutes inside. But then what I was doing is going outside in shorts, soaking wet out of the cold shower. And then I would go sit outside at 20 below zero and do another 20 minutes outside. And I would be heated.
Okay, Wim Hof.
Well, no, because he can do it for hours, and I could, but it was crazy because
that's really impressive.
Yeah. Well, when I started though, the first time I ever did it, I'd done 30 seconds and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this. I knew I did 30 seconds in the cold and I'm like, there's no fathomable way.
I am not I can't. I hate the cold so much. I hate being cold. I can do ice baths, but trying to it's hard enough just to breathe in an ice bath. Like it's hard enough just to catch your breath when you're in it. It takes you've got to go numb first, You know
what it does is, so what you learn in the process in your fight or flight, there's a couple things they've tricked. So I got to meet Wim Hof here in America the first time he was here. So I'm here with all these people learning how to do it, but it's with Wim. So it's like, you're more easily like, he's doing it and he's right here in front of me.
I can do it. I can do it.
All these other people are dumb. We're all going to do it.
He can go sit in the snowy mountains for days and just breathe in the cold.
Yeah.
He can do it.
So
we can do it.
It makes perfect sense that all 100 something of us are at these little kiddie pools that are all about, about 3 feet. They're filled with ice and we're all going to sit in them together. This makes perfect sense. We're all going to do it. One of the things that they did to trick us, he said, because they get into the science of it, right? Part of it is when you sing, part of your brain that's singing can't do
other things.
Yeah, it can't process the fight or flight a little bit. So
did anybody else know that? I didn't know.
Yeah, so you got a picture like 130, 40 of us or whatever it was, all singing from The Wizard of Oz outside in our swimsuits, and guys and girls, all of us out there, we're all singing something from The Wizard of Oz. I'm blanking on what it was.
Yellow Brick Road song?
Something like that. And we're all getting in this cold we're all going to get in these ice baths for a minute and a half after we'd already done the breath work, and we're still going to do the breath work. But now we're in this, man, it was, that was early on.
What was that? How intense was that?
Awful, because I had not done the Wim Hof process. So I had not learned how to control. There's a point within 30 days where I could walk outside in a t-shirt at freezing and just hold my arms and I would sweat.
Okay, I need to get there.
Because your mind, you can do it.
How do you do that?
You can start. What you do is, by the way, it's not mindless. It's not like one of Wim's books is The Fire Inside. It's about how do you create this inner fire. Mm-hmm. And what you do is you don't just go, oh, I need to blast the furnace. You can actually mindfully, almost relatively to the cold, heat yourself up enough. So I don't mean over sweat like drip. I mean, I could heat myself to the point where I am very comfortable outside. I'm not cold. I'm not shivering. I'm not tricking myself into not being cold. I'm actually generating the inner heat. I'm burning. I'm developing brown. When babies are young, they have brown fat. Yeah. So anyway, it is something that you can regulate over time. And then when I met Wim, he had just completed 50 miles in the desert, and they had a neuroscientist get up on stage and say, listen, Wim just also showed that you can control your cooling as well as your heating and your inflammatory response, which again, first guy on earth to do it. And anyway, he gave a big warning about, listen, the margin of error, the human body for cold has a massive amount of error room. It can be cold. It can be basically can freeze and you can come back. But when it comes to overheating, the human body has a half a degree before it can die. And he's like, please, nobody go out and do what Wim just did. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't try it. But Wim had been monitored and he had people with, but he went 50 miles with no water, nothing. He went 50 miles in the desert running, and they watched him control his cooling. He cooled himself and kept his body temperature. And so it was like, whoa, there's a lot more to longevity, to human mind and consciousness, because then it gets into the cellular stuff.
So let's talk about that for a second. We're talking about, knowing that there's more to the mind, the body, the overall health of our system. What do you think, how do you feel like information has been disseminated regarding this in general to the population? Do you feel like this has been presented as, like a breath work, yoga, meditation? Do you feel like it's presented as sort of like a woo-woo type of thing? And do you feel like the majority still believe that way? Or do you think people are kind of waking up to reality, knowing that these things don't have anything to do with, witchery or sorcery? This is actually scientific fact, that it helps the body. Do you feel like information is being disseminated properly, or do you feel like the government, or do you feel like the powers that be are
unrelated to government?
Yeah, unrelated to that. Do you feel like the powers that be are intentionally separating us from this knowledge because they know it contributes to an expansion in our consciousness?
I think there's some theories around all of it, and to more address if people have a curiosity and we want to light that fire, because there's value in all these systems, there's value in all these experiences because they are contributing to consciousness and your longevity and living well.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to live well.
Right.
So I don't think that the presentation of it matters I think people take it because of what their personal experience. They'll take it however they want. And sometimes they might think it's a little woo-woo, or they might take it really seriously. Great. But in applying it to yourself, I think the function of doing that daily, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or then 45 minutes, or, like as you're ramping yourself up, it's like, so now I'm working out, I'm reading, I'm breathing. Are you taking everything? Are you overlapping some of the practices, or, like what you're taking in for food and what you're taking in for exercise and what you're doing for meditation, and how much of your yoga and anything else is overlapping? And then what other therapies, like again, in the longevity world, you're taking supplements and you're eating healthy food, but then what about red light therapies? Like what are you doing while you're sitting in a red light sauna for 45 minutes? Are you just sitting there and watching television or listening to music, or are you meditating? And so there's all these things to do for us to get back on track. And there's all these different things that distract us, or it's like the woo-woo.
What do you feel like those things are? Sorry to interrupt, but what do you feel like those things are that distract us?
Well, just for instance, learning red light therapy is so good for your hair and for your blood and for collagen. And so I'm in a red light sauna where there's an offering of either I can get really meditative music on, I can have no music on, I could just sit there and just be silent, or I could watch every kind of streaming service available. And I have my own account, and they'll set it up for you. So I get to go in and sit down and immediately hit play. And so how much am I taking this therapy? At what level am I taking it? And so it'd be really easy to be distracted by, and on the one hand, get the benefit of collagen and blood work and everything else. But at the same time, if you're going to go and fully experience your day-to-day life engaged, and that doesn't mean every second of my life has to have meaning.
But let's back up to what you just said, though. We're talking about distraction in the red light sauna. I think that that's relative to every aspect of our life and day and what we do. We can choose to be distracted or choose not to, but the way that we are intentional with our practices, the intention that we put behind it, just like you're saying, if you're sitting in a red light sauna and you're watching Netflix, or you're sitting in a red light sauna and you're meditating, are the benefits the same? Would you walk out of that sauna with the same benefit if you sit in there and watch Netflix and bring that energy in? Or do you feel like it's more beneficial to sit in there and meditate? Do you feel like the goal of red light therapy is going to be achieved to greater capacity through the intention you put behind it, or while manifesting or meditating on certain things? Or do you feel like you could just go in there, watch Netflix, and still get the same benefit? Here's
the super positive, addictive, good thing that ties in also to the Wim Hof or any kind of breath work. In the super cold with the breath work, I saw geometric shapes. I experienced like a switch going off, like an energetic, a presence to my being that doesn't exist unless you're doing this kind of breath work, right?
That's beautiful.
And that combined with like the red light with the other work, if you were to engage, in my opinion, if you were to engage all of it and the breath work, which, by the way, when you're really, really hot in a sauna, I don't know if doing breath work would be the best thing. I don't think potentially hyperventilating.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Did I say that?
No, you didn't.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
saying it because I'm thinking your question, which is how much more could I be engaged in the red light sauna? And I'm thinking to myself, it's like, wait, I could do breath work. And I'm like, hold on. Like, you can hyperventilate. You can, there's these things where it's like, I don't think I want to pass out in a 140 degree red light sauna. At the same time, it's like, okay, wait, could I do another kind of brain entrainment? So instead of watching a streaming service or getting on one of those services and turning on a brain entrainment exercise, like there could be a brain entrainment. And you got to wonder then, the more you engage at every level, how much can you shape your, the mindfulness of your cellular, like repairing your spinal column? Like, does it have to be just
right? That's what I'm saying is, like, do you in these experiences, and not just in a red light sauna, but in any area of your life, you know, there's so much power behind intention, right? Like, what I think that was Wayne Dyer's book, The Power of Intention. But there's so much power behind intention. And so do you feel like when we move through any area of our life, like, let's just take the red light sauna out. Okay. Let's just take that out. And let's just say in any area of our life, do you feel like there is a significant difference in outcomes depending on what type of intention do you know, like you said, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, you know, when he was injured, and he, in his mind, he manifested a repair of his spinal column, and he repaired it. And so of course that changed his life and perspective on the world in general. But you know, Joe Dispenza is a walking, manifesting miracle. You know, he's a great case of the power of intention, the power behind our thoughts. You know, what we think, our thoughts carry energy that move, you know, they emit frequencies, they move into the ether, and they bring stuff to us. And so if you're constantly sitting around thinking about scarcity and sadness, then you're just going to attract that, right? But if you're sitting around and you're thinking about positive things and you're manifesting great things in your life, then those things generally, you know, that's what comes to you. It's a match of frequency, right? So do you, like, moving through different areas of your life, do you feel like intention behind anything that we do, not just in a red light sauna, but in anything that we do, that it makes a difference when we put specific intention behind it?
I think that's true. And it feels like, I want to just give a quick answer and let people sit with it. On the other hand, I want to be encouraging in that it sounds overwhelming to myself.
What specifically?
Doing all of it at once. Like, it just seems like, where do I start? It's like analysis paralysis.
You know what? That's really good, because I think that when I started waking up, when it really kicked into like the hyperspeed, it started in 2013, but then 2022, I thought I was losing my mind. Slipping out of this reality into somewhere else. I didn't know what was happening, you know, but I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, analysis paralysis.
Why is my brain like this today?
We've been covering a lot. Well, there's been
analysis paralysis. Yeah, sorry guys. I'm gonna get with it. Maybe I need a nap.
No one even noticed if you hadn't brought it up. No,
my bad.
You didn't even trip.
I'll just tell it myself.
That's
I
fine.
like
Call
doing
yourself
that.
out.
I like to call myself
Nobody
out.
saw it. I didn't even see it.
Anyways, analysis paralysis. I think that's something whenever I realized what was happening and I was trying to figure out how to help myself, where to start, what to do, how do I grow, how do I evolve, how do I expand, where do I start? There's all of these different modalities and where do you even begin plugging in? And my suggestion, I'm not going to suggest anything because everybody has breath work. I would start there. Plant medicine isn't for everybody because my natural go-to is just like, rip that Band-Aid off. Like,
but why don't you tie that? I'm just what you said about breath work though, about it being almost as intense or pretty much
it is like the breath work you don't need psychedelics to have psychedelic experiences. You can do this with your breath alone, sitting in your living room.
Yeah.
You can have this experience. You can achieve these levels of awareness and consciousness just using the breath. And so I would start probably with breath work.
Almost as I look at it a lot like people go running in the morning and it's like, great. Well, like I'm exercising my heart and my lungs. It's like, yeah, but not the full muscle capacity of the lungs and its ability to absorb oxygen, which is also why a lot of these biohackers are having these highly intense filtration systems within their homes, and they're not going outside or, air quality or anything. They're really being specific about creating an environment for the building blocks that they are for whatever they're ingesting. They're making sure that the air that's coming in is as pure as possible. So there's really no speed bumps to the biological system we have functioning well. The thing is, I don't think we're not just independent creatures. I think collective consciousness matters. I think where we are collectively matters. So wherever people are in the process of whether it's waking up or becoming more engaged or coming out of one modality or another, I think that it's important that they engage together so it's not just a matter of just creating your own personal fortress of solitude and healing and longevity. I think there's something very important about, community wise, it's not just having people who have a bunch of the same opinions, but I think there's a brain entrainment. So the breath work also gets into the brain entrainment, some of that frequency energy stuff. And I think for us to experience the full benefit, we have to be good to each other. I don't mean just nice. I mean, there's we have to become more and more actually actively conscious of this connection that twins seem to sense, or people who say they're psychic sense or second sight or those different abilities. I think there's something actually to that. There's a physical reality to those mental connections that, you can't just leave. You can't just isolate yourself alone.
Do you think that these that as we awaken, the more and more of us that are waking up, do you think we're going to start seeing people as we reconnect to ourselves and remember who we are and heal, and our consciousness expands? Do you feel that ultimately we're going to start hearing more and more stories of different psychic experiences, like as we reconnect? Because, we've discussed on previous shows how we were in agreement that, we're so disconnected from ourselves and through these things. We're disconnected from the breath. We're disconnected from proper nutrition. And, we spend so much time on concrete and inside of walls. We're not earthing. We're not exchanging. We're not spending enough time exchanging electrons with the earth, which decreases inflammation in your body. And it has all kinds of health benefits. So, if we're not doing these things, we're not practicing these things, then we're ultimately disconnected from ourselves. But when we start putting these pieces together and taking these steps forward to reconnect to ourselves, realign our mind, body, and spirit, and actively practice these modalities and different healing techniques and stuff like that, do you feel like we're going to start hearing more and more and reading more and more stories about people having these types of psychic experiences?
I think we're not only going to read more about it, I think we're actually going to sense it between each other.
Oh, I like that. That's interesting.
Wouldn't it be?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's really far off either, because you can, like, I'm sensitive to other people's energy. I can be around another person and immediately pick up, what kind of energy field they're vibrating in. I know whether or not I want to spend, a couple minutes with that person, a
5
couple
seconds.
hours with that person, or if I'm just like, man, let's hang out all the time. You're awesome. Your energy is awesome. But, and so do you feel like, do you feel like, experiencing it or feeling it from other people is going to be like that? Like feeling and sensing someone's energy field. Like we're going to be able to sense that they have these abilities.
Yeah, it's kind of like there we go, empathetic singularity.
That's
a good description.
Grab the mouse.
Okay, you want me to throw it up there?
Yeah, so other people can see it.
So that's not a bad one. I think that this is what people get excited about at fairs, at conferences.
Mm-hmm.
There's this generally like sometimes a really okay, fine. It could be an elevator programming convention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not something everyone would be excited about, but they are excited about it. And there's just excitement about what their subject is, right?
Sure.
But I think it goes beyond that. When you get a group of people in any given situation, whether it's the World Soccer Cup or it's a convention that some of us would think is boring, we're like, oh, there's this like big energetic boost.
Mm-hmm.
But I think right now there's an unconscious, you have everyone they're not in one direction. They're all different people and they all have different, maybe religious beliefs or whatever, all of it, physical, wherever they're at. But you get people in a collective agreement for a purpose of a thing. I think we have some very, very elementary, conscious connections or empathetic singularity. But
I like that, by the way, retro Roman.
Yeah.
Empathetic singularity. I want to remember that one.
Yeah. I think though that if we're doing these new practices, if we're getting more tuned up individually, I think that collective consciousness experiences, I think the shape of it and the feeling of the personality of how it feels is going to be different. I think it won't be as unconscious or just that, we're all at the convention center together. I think that it's going to be more, I think it's going to be more intentional in our thought process.
Please, so I can control
there you go.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think it'll be something that we'll really have our head around collectively, but we have all this dissidence in the world right now. And I do think that no matter what the modality is that the more people, and again, you could say it only takes 2 or 3 people, but I think if we're each individually, I guess maybe I'm hoping, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, but I do think that the more we individually practice these things, it can be contagious in a positive way.
Oh, I think so too. 100%. I've already experienced, let me do this. I've had people say like, what did you do? How do I get to where you are? Not that I'm anywhere special, but how do I get to where you are?
Your beads say otherwise.
Yeah. Thank you, bead merchant. Anyhow, yeah, I think that
people are saying that you're different or that you're
but because it's an energetic, your frequency is just different. You vibrate differently, and people feel that and they know. But I think that there is this obvious mass awakening on the planet. I wish it was more massive, and faster, obviously, because I really feel like if we could just flip a switch and wake everybody up, everybody would put their guns down and stop the violence and love each other, honestly. So that is like the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But I think, and I don't want to get into this on this show. I don't want to dive into politics, but I am going to say, because we can't really ignore it, like what's happening in the world right now is appalling. And I think that in general, it's not just
dissonance on a global scale.
Yeah, it's not that. It's also it's a consciousness issue. And if we could just wake up faster, if more of us could wake up faster, and we could and expand our consciousness, and you can easily see what's happening, but when you're knee deep in a sleep, you're just still, it's like there's this division, it's right and left and blah blah blah, and it's a mess. And the problem is consciousness. We don't have to label anything. We don't have to label anyone or any specific party or affiliation or any of that. We don't have to label anything, because we're all human. It doesn't matter what race, what nationality, where you come from, what gender you are. we're one race. We're a human race, just one race. And if we could wake up and see that we're all connected, and I can't hurt you without hurting myself, or hurt another person without harming myself, because ultimately we are all one. We all come from one source, and we all share that source energy through us. There is a collective. We are all connected. And if we don't wake up, look what's happening.
Yeah.
But could you imagine, like, I just picture some of these pictures of things that I've seen in LA and in New York City and in Philly and some of these other places. I'm seeing, these two opposing teams.
Okay.
You've got this group over here lined up and this group lined up over here, and it's like a face off, and everybody's got weapons and they're all ready to whoop ass. And it's just like, okay, well, whoa, wait. What if we just flipped a wake up switch? I feel like immediately, if you could picture this in your head, this is what I picture in my head when I see a situation like this, where you've got these two opposing groups ready to face off and be violent. What if they didn't? What if we just had a switch and we could just flip the go switch? Everybody wakes up in those groups, and I just envision everybody looking around at each other and looking down at weapons in their hands, and they're like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? And then they just drop the weapons and disarm, and they're just apologizing. I'm so sorry. I was just about to whoop your ass, and then I woke up, and I feel like that's what it would be if we just wake up faster. If we're more conscious and aware of ourselves and our true nature, then once you do that, then other people's nature, and then there's nothing to fight about anymore. It's only love. And so if we could just flip the awaken switch, I just feel like all the weapons would just be put down, and then we can just love each other and live in peace. Maybe that's hopeful, wishful thinking, but.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier was about the idea of it being woo-woo, or we were talking a little bit about biohacking. Well, we were talking about biohacking and breath work and how people approach it and say, hey, is it woo-woo or not? Or how do we get into this? Individually, we all have to take our steps. We all have to go at this individually, and we all have to get to where we want to be consciously. So the question is, if we have to get there individually and there isn't a wake-up switch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is an overall overriding main switch that someone could get to if they had the right consciousness. But in the fact that we don't have that, right? So individually we have to go at it. There are some barriers to that. For instance, this started with me. Well, one of the things we talked about early on was I had an option for a drug that also shows signs of longevity, which is great. So I'm taking care of a couple things, and this could be like one of those miracle, amazing drugs. So, hey, there's the longevity factor, and great. But then that's scientifically at one point. But then we have all this work behind Wim Hof, Stig Severinsen, and these other breathing. So what happens then? When somebody approaches us and says, hey, this is woo-woo, or this isn't. I think a lot of times, whether it's quality food, how often do we get stalled up because somebody in quotes, academic setting says, hey, well, that's not right. And then we're like, well, or I love this one, peer reviewed people. A lot of people don't understand peer review. It's like, just because you get a lot of people with the same opinion who agree on something.
Yeah.
I think we have some examples as to what happens when peer review gets out of control and all along. And I think it's a good thing to keep in mind that it's not about doubting the powers that be, or you have very brick and mortar institutionalized systems. Like, for instance, your autonomic nervous system is called that because you're not supposed to be able to control it, but you can. And Wim and Stig and now lots of us have proven, we can control these things. However, when you're trying to wake up and when you're trying to do all these things, there's different modalities and things that would stop you from having those new thoughts or things. And there is some serious weight against you from waking up individually. And I think we have a decent example to share of that starts with something that is insane. But do you want to read it out for people? As far as I think it's important that if we're going to do the biohacking and the consciousness, when we go at this ourselves, if you have just a spark of excitement about this, or if you're partway down it, there's always people in everyone's lives, in my life, in your life, I think, that have been said, well, that's just not true, or that's just might be your opinion, but that's just not a fact, or that's not peer reviewed or something.
Right.
And then, but throughout history and time, before something becomes a fact or actually proven out, it's just woo woo.
Right. So a perfect example of this is a German physician named Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis.
Yep.
I really thought I was going to butcher that, but I think I did okay. So this man was not German, Hungarian. Sorry, yep. Hungarian physician. And he discovered that maybe it would be a good idea that we wash our hands before handling new babies. And then he was completely excommunicated or ostracized from the scientific community, put in an insane asylum in the mid 1800s.
Yep.
They beat the crap out of him, and then he died 14 days later
of an infection, allegedly.
Of an infection, allegedly. Well, who knows?
Yeah.
But here we are. Let's fast forward. And then it's just common sense that you don't handle a baby without washing your hands.
Yeah, he does the work to figure out that, hey, it appears that physicians who handle cadavers and then go deliver babies, that the babies and the moms, or maybe both, to get sick and die. And perhaps you should wash your hands, which he started doing. And they markedly see a reduction in something so elementary now. It's absurd that we're even talking about it, right? Like, you need to breathe air. And this man was institutionalized. It's insane. We really got to.
But there's a perfect example, though, of, it's like we think we know everything. Right. You know, it's just like, here we are, 2025. All the information we have is the information we have. We know everything. Okay, well, what happens in 2026 when we make new discoveries?
Right.
You know, are we going to just call it woo woo, or are we gonna just kick these people out of the community because they just come up with something new? At what point do we say, okay, maybe let's consider this for a second before we make snap judgments, because it's like a new idea. I mean, because now we look at this, he was possibly murdered over this.
Semmelweis was murdered over saying doctors should wash their hands to deliver your baby.
Insane.
And that was literally, he was considered insane.
Exactly.
He was literally put into an insane asylum.
So, you know, all of these people, because I have been called, I cannot tell you how many times I've been called woo woo. I'm pretty sure I've been called a witch many times. I don't know. But my woo woo witchery and manifesting and the power of intention and my belief, like hardcore belief in this, I've received beautiful labels because of it, you know. But you know what's so crazy is I feel like that we are just like this situation. There's more and more data as we study the quantum world, and there's more and more data revealing the actual nature of reality and what we're capable of and how we do it. And so let's just give it a little bit more time, and manifesting is going to be a mainstream thing that we're all trying to do. You know, I think, unless the powers that be realize that through these things, we can create our own reality, and then they lose control. And so they're going to try to keep us dumb and ignorant and numb, full of meds and pharmaceuticals and all these fun things to keep us separate from ourselves. But if we fight that, because this isn't an individual decision, you don't need anybody to tell you whether you can or cannot manifest. But let's just consider for a second that your words, our words, which they do carry a frequency. This frequency is, everything is frequency. We vibrate, everything vibrates. We all emit a frequency. It's pretty well known, right?
Yeah.
So we emit this frequency. Our words, when we speak them out into the ether, they go. And whatever those words are, whatever frequency they're carrying into the ether, is what you're going to receive back. And I think that while this sounds insane for a lot of people, this is a real thing. It's real. And maybe we don't understand, you know, all of the science behind it, but it doesn't make it any less real. So I think that we're going to see, similar to, you know, washing our hands and things like that, to deliver babies. Where's our screen? There it is. I think that this is going to become a more mainstream, used to, they would like yoga is witchcraft.
Oh yeah.
Yoga is and this isn't like an old thing. I mean, people are still saying that yoga is witchcraft.
Yeah.
Or meditation is witchcraft.
Depending on where you're, and again, no matter where you're from, there's the right type of yoga, there's the right type of meditation.
Exactly,
so even in the modalities where you say, yoga is good, well, this
Mm-hmm.
yoga is better than that yoga, or this one's bad, this one's good, and it's like, okay, hold on. The intent, I think, when you say you speak words, I mean, this might be a side point, but when you say you speak out the words, I don't think it's the words. I think it's the
intention
behind the words. That your brain,
Yeah.
the way it's connected to the ether.
No, you're right, because you put whatever words you want to put out, you could put out.
But that energy behind the word.
Yeah.
And so there you go. If you have, and I think it's crazy that we have to take Semmelweis from the 1850s and we think, oh, well, that just doesn't happen today. We think we're so smart now
Mm-hmm.
that we don't make those kind of mistakes. But the reason I think we wanted to include this for everyone tonight is that when you look into his story and the tragedy of it, and the fact that they literally put him in an insane asylum for saying that you have to wash your hands before you have a baby come out, let alone wear gloves or anything, just wash your hands, that he's insane.
Mm-hmm.
So we keep making these kind of mistakes with consciousness, with what can be done collectively and individually to raise not just this woo-woo idea of consciousness, but the idea of peace and love and of actual unity with humanity.
Oh, that's beautiful. Unity with humanity. That should be a bumper sticker.
It's ours. It's copyrighted.
RKOX.
Right now. Yes, we're copywriting that right now.
Unity for humanity.
What?
Can we put that one on?
Fine, go for it. I don't know.
Maybe
Keep
not.
going. Maybe not.
Maybe
What
not
should we
that
do? We talk. Why don't you talk about it? Is working. All right.
It's walking witchcraft is what he said.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll leave that one out, but we're going to acknowledge that. I agree, Retro Roman.
Okay. Yeah. So for those that want to read comments, go to our YouTube, go to Not Aliens, I guess. But that was it's great. Everybody comes from a different background. Everyone has a different belief system.
But can we acknowledge, though, that regardless of what your background is, it's all the same with just different sets of rules? Like whatever your belief system is, it's basically all the same with different sets of rules. Divine source runs in everybody, and there are no special. You know what? We won't. Yeah, I'll keep that to a minimum.
I think it's important. I know things have been troubling you or all of us with the more you wake up, the more you see an opportunity to. I think what's hard is, on one hand, you become more engaged in your own consciousness, and then you see really easily how different things could be if more people were like that.
Yes.
And so then there's new trouble for yourself. In that, on one hand, you're waking up, on the other hand, you're like, so you could very quickly become disheartened over that state, rather than not just blindly. It's not blind to just be positive, but I think to get to that level, and then to know that there is a unity within humanity that is, I think there's an undercurrent. It exists. It might be unconscious, but I don't think the baseline for humanity is distance and to hurt each other. Maybe. Or what do you think? Do you think there's a baseline, or do you think it could be a happenstance, or do you think that we could just? Do you think we're? I don't want to base this down to just being, are we good or evil? But do you think that?
I think we're inherently good.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I might be. I don't want to say.
Yeah, I think we're inherently good. I think that the behavior of, unhealed humans is because they're just that, they're unhealed. And so I think that if more of I think that there are people on the planet that are just bad people. I think that they do bad things, and so maybe they're not inherently good, but for the majority, I do think that we're inherently good. But I think that even inherently good people still do bad things, make bad choices, hurt other people because they're not awake. They're not healed. And so I think that ultimately it's about healing. Healing expands your consciousness. When your consciousness expands, you're more plugged into humanity in general. But that it all starts with healing. We have to heal first. We have to realize who we are. We have to realize how we are unhealed, in what ways that we are unhealed. And we have to go at it. We got to do the inner work. You've got to do the shadow work. You've got to get in there and you've got to heal these things about in yourself. And once you heal that and express that negative stuck energy from your network, then you raise your vibration, which expands your consciousness. It's a chain of events, but it all begins with a recognition of being unhealed. And you've got to, once you recognize that you're unhealed, then it's like, okay, well, I've got to fix this. I need to be better. I've got to heal myself. I want to feel better. I want to be happy. And so then you got to do that work.
I want to back up because you said it a few times and some people might not know. What is shadow work?
Ooh, that's the dark inside you.
Yeah, but there's definitely, there's a process. I don't want to.
There are things inside us like so the things that you don't want to look at in yourself that you just leave in the shadows and you don't look at. One of the things that plant medicine does is it puts a spotlight in those shadows and you don't have any choice but to look at it. It's just there in your face.
But you process it? Okay.
Yeah.
Because you don't have it, because it just.
Yeah, you don't have a choice. But for those people that don't want to get into plant medicine, that's fine. You can do it in all kinds of other ways. But shadow work doesn't have to be done with medicine or plant medicine or anything. Shadow work is done to when you recognizing what's in the shadows and bringing them out. Like you've got to look in the shadows. You've got to look in the darkness inside yourself. You've got to look at the things that are unhealed. And you've got to heal those things. Once you heal those things or even begin healing those things, you immediately start feeling better. And that energy is transmitted it's not the word I'm looking for, transferred or experienced. There we go. It's just experienced and felt through by other people. And that I think creates sparks in other people as well for healing, but just like it has me, I've had people say like, how do I get there? What do I do? Where do I start? What, whatever. And basically you just, it's reading, it's breath work. It's researching and learning yourself. It's a deep understanding of who you are and why you are the way that you are. And then once you do that work and you start peeling back those, trauma layers or, broken pieces of yourself from whatever it is, your childhood, relationships, whatever it is, we all have it. We have ancestral trauma that we carry in our DNA that we're not even conscious of.
That's true. Yeah.
And what the best example of that is I heard or read or whatever, I think I read, when a woman's walking down a dark alley or anybody walking down a dark alley and that gut feeling is like, turn around. That's your ancestors saying, hey, I've been in this position before, sister, you need to turn around and go the other way, and so it's, I think we carry this, we can feel these things in us. We have ancestral DNA inside of us, which stores ancestral memories. And so sometimes the way that we feel and the way that we, the way that we experience things might not even really be our own. It might be our ancestors, it might be a little bit of their memory that's been stored in our DNA and we are feeling or experiencing it. So there's also ancestral trauma in there. We get a child born from their mother, that DNA, there's genetic memory stored in that DNA that's passed on to the child. So when your parents experience traumatic childhoods or things like that, and they don't heal those traumas, then they're passing that down to their children. And then their children have these things stuck in them that they didn't even know were in there or why they are the way, why is this child so damn angry? They're 2, well, maybe that's why, who knows? But all of this shadow stuff, all of the shadow work it's inevitable for anybody who wants to expand their consciousness. You have to do the work. The work is unavoidable. You can't expand your consciousness without healing yourself inside. I don't think. I think that in order to really expand, to really see and experience an evolution of your soul, you have to heal first.
And I think tying it all together, it's important. I think, and it's been hard and overwhelming for me to understand that in order to heal yourself, you do need to eat not just
Mhm.
perceived healthy food, but you need to have the right nutrients. You have to have the building blocks. You have to get the right sleep. Biohacking isn't this idea that, hey, I'm just going to look and be energetically younger and live longer. It's that if you do these things, you're getting away the physical and mental blocks
Mhm.
through the meditation and the breath work and the food and the exercise and the sleep. All of it together is allowing you to be conscious more, or to
Mhm.
be able to see the path to it.
Right, right.
If you don't do the steps, and it doesn't matter which one you start with,
Mhm.
it matters that you start. I think everybody needs to know it's not just to be hopeful. I think it's a very
Mhm.
elementary, but it's so realistic that you just start with the one thing you're drawn to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I agree with that. Whether that's breath work or journaling or meditation or yoga or whatever it is you're naturally, drawn to, that's probably where you should start. I agree with that.
Yeah,
So we are out of time.
we are.
This has been a great show, though. This has been
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Do you want to thank our sponsors one more time?
Yeah. Thank you, CKC, Good Food Catering, and Lightcom LLC. Thank you so much for your support, and everyone who's watched and everyone who's listening in the future.
Yep. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye. You got it.